I'm Steph, welcome to today's sew along. We are making the Jarvis top by Trama patterns, and I will link this below. I got this on Etsy. This is the second time I've made this. First time I made it with buttons, but it was a little bit too oversized for me. So tram.a pattern studio, and this is called Jarvis top, and this is view D, short V neckline. So there's other views which are longer, like a really deep V, and one with buttons as well. So this is what we're making today. I'm making mine out of double gauze. I don't know what you're making yours out of, but I hope that if you are a beginner, any of these points help you make your own top. It's a really oversized, nice casual fit, and not much more to say. Let's crack on straight into the video.
We now have all of our pieces cut out. That's our facing and our interfacing. And the next step is to attach the interfacing to the wrong side of the facing. So if you don't know, I'm using quite a thin interfacing because this is already quite thick and I don't need too much structure and rigidity in my fabric. The interfacing is a fabric which is used to make certain parts of a garment more stable. It's used an additional layer which applies to the inside garments, such as collars, cuff, waistbands, pockets, etc. And it helps to add firmness, shape and structure. So this will just make the V-neck at the front a bit more structured, which is why I'm just using a thin interfacing today. So I'll show you how to attach this. Go ahead and heat up your iron, then open up your facing piece. You want the wrong side facing up. This is the wrong side of the fabric. So if you're using a pattern fabric, it's usually the lighter side. Now place your interfacing down. So you want the rough side, the side with the glue, to be facing down onto the wrong side of the fabric. Now I'm using double gauze, which is a little bit finicky to work with as it stretches out. But if you're using like a cotton poplin or just any 100% cotton that has less stretch in it, yours should line up a lot better than what mine is. Now you can go ahead and get a towel or a cloth. I'm just going to use this old bed sheet. I'm just going to fold this old bed sheet over it. It should come out nice and flat. And then just press and hold it on for a few seconds. And you're not wanting to use steam on this. So all this is doing is melting the glue on the interfacing into your facing piece, your grey piece here. Try and fuse them together. Just give it a quick check, see if it's stuck down. I've missed a few places, and then so I'm just going to go in again. Sometimes it might take a little bit longer, depends on the quality of your interfacing and how old it is as well. So I don't think I'm using the best quality interfacing at the moment. Usually means it's not enough glue on it. Now that has fused nicely. So because I'm using double gauze, which has quite a bit of stretch in it, the interfacing stops that. It stops all the stretch in it. So put that to one side and we'll go and do the other piece. So because I am working with double gauze and it has quite a lot of stretch in it, as you can see here, which will make sewing a lot more difficult, what we're going to go ahead and do next is along the two neckline pieces at the back and the front, we are going to put a stay stitch in. So this is just a long straight stitch, and that just stops. So that's really rigid now, really firm. It stops all the stretch in the fabric and because we're using interfacing, which stops all the stretching that pieces, this should help it line up better. So I've already done the back neckline, so now we're going to go ahead and do the front V. Go ahead and use a long stitch length. I'm using a stitch length of 4, which is the maximum my machine goes up to, and we're going to sew about 1/4 of an inch away from the edge. Now we have a nice neckline that isn't stretching out. Now we're on to the fun bit, actually getting to sew the pieces together. So put your back piece right sides up, and then your front piece right sides down, so you got right sides facing together. You want to line up your seams. So this is the shoulder seam. So line them up, stick a couple of pins in, and if you've cut these pieces accurately, the shoulder seams should line up. And if you're using double gauze, good luck. No. If you're using double gauze, there's a bit of stretch in it, so there's a bit of forgiveness in cutting inaccuracies. So that's my shoulder seams nicely pinned. Now we want the side seams. So I'm right under the armpit, I'm going all the way down. Now those seams that we've all just pinned together, we're going to sew them. So I'm going to sew with 3/8 of an inch along the 2 side seams and the 2 shoulder seams. I put my seam gauge in on the 3/8 line just to help me along and assist me. We're going to start off with shoulder seams, making sure that you backstitch at the beginning and at the end. Remember to take your pins out as you go along. That's one line done, that's 3/8. I'll do the other side. And now onto the side seams. And there we are. Now you can go ahead and move on to the next stage. Now that my seams have been sewn, I want to go ahead and actually finish them off. Now I finish off my seams with the overlocker, and it just cuts off all of these. So that's still going to be I'm not going to cut over the line that I've just sewn, I'm just sewing over these edges. So you end up with 2 lines of stitching. Now this is a better finish having this line sewn first, because this doesn't show through the seams on the right side, but the overlocking thread does. When you open up the fabric, you can still see the inside. You can see all the white stitches coming through, which is super annoying. You can go ahead and zigzag all of these seams, do a zigzagging stitch. You're going to want to change your stitch to a zigzag stitch and using a length of 2 and a width of 5. So just do a few stitches in place first, and then we're just going to sew all the way along here, and your seam should be a lot neater than mine. We're going to catch all the edges within the zigzag stitch. So, and if they're not super neat, you can just go ahead and there we have it. So I don't think it's as neat, but 1, nobody's going to see it, and 2, you use what you have. So there is another technique you can use, and it's called French seam, but we are not covering that in today's video. But you can go ahead and look it up if you do want to do something that is a wee bit neater and hides all the raw edges altogether. The next stage that we're going to do is we're going to sew the hems, and we will come and finish the facing. We'll do that as the very last stage. So first you want to go heat up your iron, and you are going to fold in the arm sleeves by 1/4 of an inch and then press, and then fold them in again by 3/8 of an inch and then press again. For the bottom of your top, you are folding in by 3/8 of an inch, and then you're folding in by another 3/8 of an inch. You can make this a wee bit longer by doing 1/4 of an inch, then 3/8 an inch, same as the arms. That is entirely up to you. Let's go ahead to our iron and start pressing. Now I'm using a little bit of steam just to try and hold this. The double gauze isn't the easiest material to work with. I am just eyeballing this because this is just a quick casual top. But if you want to go for more accurate sewing, I would not eyeball it, because look how uneven this is. So that's my rough 1/4 of an inch-ish. Then fold it up again. I'm just going to open it up because these bits in the at the side seams are a bit of a pain. Then fold it up again. Just going to slowly go around, giving it really good press. Making sure you don't burn your fingers. Now it is ready for top stitching. For this I'm going to use a stitch length of 3. And you're wanting to sew from the wrong side, so you can make sure that you're actually catching all the seam. So if you go from the other side, you won't be able to see if you're actually catching it. Making sure you're back stitching at the beginning and the end. That's what it looks like from this side, and then from this side. For me, I've got a wavy line because this seam was not very accurate, because double gauze is hard to work with. So I'm not doing the same for the arms because it was it's a bit of a challenge. So I have overlocked the edge, if you have an overlocker, and what I'm simply going to do is fold it under once and fold it under twice and then top stitch. So I'm going to be doing this from the right side of the fabric this time. Now let's do a little bit of a fit check. That's the sleeves, not perfect. And a little bit messed up here. So the method that I did for the bottom is the one I recommend, folding it up twice. And then this is the bottom half. So for me, it's about a 1 inch below my belly button. Nice oversized fit, which is what I expect. I mean, you can tuck it in if you want. So all that's got left to do now is the neckline.
We are now in the final stages of our top. And what you can see here is I have roughly pinned the facings to the top. So this is because we are going to sew the front and the back facings together with about 3/8 of an inch seam allowance as per the instructions. But you might go ahead and do that, and then when you're trying to fit it and pin it, you might realise that it's not actually the right size, so due to inaccuracies in cutting, in sewing, so you might end up with this being a wee bit too small or a wee bit too big. So I've just gone ahead and pinned it at the key places. So if you went ahead and marked all your notches onto your sewing pattern, so you should have a notch at the back, so centre back, centre front. So I've just put a pin in place in these two places, and then I've just gone round and put in a pin every couple of inches just to see how well this lines up, because you want this seam to match up with your shoulder seam. So I'm just going to do the same on the back. So as you can see here, for me, this piece is massively off, right? It's just, I think I maybe cut it too big, or I don't know. So I can feel the seam underneath. So I know this is where I'm going to want to actually sew along. So I'm going to put in a pin right where I can feel that shoulder seam. Because the important bit is making sure that this V and the centre back are actually lined up. And then on this, you can see that this piece here, the back piece, again, is a little bit short, and the front piece a little bit long. And because it's double gauze, I think it's just been cutting inaccuracies, and it's just stretched out a little bit. So again, I'm going to go right along that seam and put in a couple of pins, because that's where I want to sew along. So now I can go ahead and take all these other pins out. Now this isn't an official technique. This is something I have just picked up along the way due to the fact that I make quite a lot of errors, because I'm still on my journey. So now I'm just going to pull this off. Oh, still got my pin in. Now I'm going to go ahead and sew along this line. So it might be easier if you marked this up with some chalk. That is done. Now go ahead. So this is what you end up with, just in one big piece with your seams nicely pressed. We are going to now turn the bodice right sides out. Like so. This is the right side. And we're going, and the facing the wrong side out, and we are going to bring the facing over the bodice right sides together. Like so. Now match up your notches and your seams, and then pin in place. So there's my shoulder seam. Just going to put a couple of pins in the shoulder seam to make sure that that's really secure. I'm going to do the same on the other side. I'm going to place a few more pins in all the way around just to make sure it doesn't move while we're sewing it. Match up your back notches as well. Now we're going to sew all the way around 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch. So all the way around. I'm going to start at the centre back. So again, I'm putting in my little gauge just so the fabric can butt up against it, and make sure you go and back stitch at the beginning. Now just go slowly. And then make sure when you get to your shoulder seams that the seams are staying pressed open. You should get back to the beginning and make sure that you back stitch again. This is what it will look like. At this peak here, the triangle, the centre front, we want to snip this. Do not cut into the stitching. And this will just help give it that nice clean V at the front, and it'll help when we turn the facing and finish it off. So now, because this is going to get turned like this, we want to trim this seam allowance to reduce bulk. So go ahead and carefully do that. And we are trimming it to about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch, which is about 0.4 to 0.5 centimetres. Now as you can see, I'm not the neatest of people, right? It doesn't help that my hands are shaking because I did a workout earlier. Just carefully go all the way around. And if you do accidentally cut into the stitches, just go over that little section because you don't want a hole in your work, because it will make your life more difficult later and it will start to unravel. And if you accidentally cut an actual hole in your shirt, not that I have ever done that, obviously you should have some leftover fabric and you should be able to patch it. It doesn't mean that the top is a complete waste just because you're an idiot and you've cut into your whole piece. Not speaking from experience. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Bring out the neckline facing and press with the seam. So we're going to press it up like this all the way around and give it a good old press and seam with your iron like that. Now that's nicely pressed and the seam's pressed down, you're going to stitch right along this edge here. So there's the seam. You're going to stitch just to the other side of the seam. So for a better finishing, understitch the facing. This helps define the neckline opening and it keeps the seam stable in place with the facing pulled out. Stitch over it. You're going to catch both layers of the seam allowance beneath it. So you're catching that seam allowance that you trimmed. You're going to stitch onto that through this side. And you're going to sew all the way along. So you're stitching as close to the seam as possible, as close to the seam as possible. Now I just want to show you my shoulder seams. So they're nearly lined up but not perfect. On the other side, there's one and there's the other. So they're off by nearly a centimetre. So if yours is a bit off, don't worry about it, nobody's perfect. Now, next stage is more folding. So, trim your threads. It is easier if you do it as you go along. We're going to fold the neckline to the inner side of the bodice. So just press it basically wrong sides together, and the stitching should go. You shouldn't be able to see the stitching. We've turned the neck facing to the wrong side of the fabric, and we've given it a good press. As you can see, the understitching is on the inside of the top. So the last and final stage we are doing today is finishing this off. So turn your top wrong sides out. Now this bit is tricky and irritating, but it's going to be done for a nice neat finish. Now you could cheat and overlock this whole edge, right? But I don't think it will give a nice finish. It might feel a bit awful on your skin. Now that you've turned your top wrong sides out, we are going to start by making a small fold to the inside of the back facing. It's going to be about 1/2 centimetre or 1/4 inch. So the smaller the fold, the easier it is to get the curve nice and smooth when you're sewing it. So just start with like nice 1/4 inch, and then you're going to fold it over like that, and then you are going to pin it down to the top. So the more pins you use, the nicer that it will lay flat. All my pins in, and I've gone and tried to give it just a little bit of a press with the iron, making sure that you don't catch the end of the pins. And it should lay nice and neat. So if there's any bits sticking out, just go ahead and re-pin or put any extra pins in. Now that's all that's left to do is top stitch all the way around. You're going to want to sew right near the edge, making sure that you catch the seam underneath as you go all the way around. Voila, we have one finished Jarvis top, view D. Now pick off all your extra threads, and this is the fit on me. So I think this is quite good basics. It'll go with like most of my shorts. And if you made it in a black or a white, go with more. So as you can see, I didn't have a dark enough grey, but it's not too wobbly. So on the facing, the neck facing, I may have missed a few bits of the seam. You can go ahead and just put in a few little hand stitches, and that'll just keep that secure. And this is fit from the back. Now I think this is a brilliant starter pattern, and I'm sure you can find a free alternative online if you just have a look. But this is good for if you want to make this into a dress. I can immediately see that this will make it over my hips, or I just have to widen it, curve it out a little bit to make sure that it does fit over my hips. If I want like a nice oversized look, that isn't difficult to do. You can see patterns that online. So then I could then maybe add a tie, a belt to it. I can put some belt hoops on. I can add a tie. So then I've got a nice dress with a little bit of shape on. I could then experiment with maybe putting in some bust darts, maybe some darts at the front, maybe some darts in the back. It has such variety. If I want, I can just make the sleeves longer. or I can make the sleeves shorter, so then it's just a vest. I think there's a lot of variety in this pattern to give you, if you want to try different things and make the most of your money if you bought this pattern. And the fact that there's 4 different views in this pattern, I think is fantastic. Like, so now if you want to go maybe tackle the button version, which I did previously, didn't particularly like it because it's a little bit oversized on me. But for this one, this is perfect. It's come out way better than I was expecting, and I absolutely love it. And I'm as much as I'm not a huge neutrals fan, I don't have any consistency in my wardrobe, so I do need some neutrals if I want to actually wear my handmade wardrobe. I hope that you like this tutorial, and we will see you in the next one.